Hello everyone, thank you for returning to the channel. If you enjoy true crime stories, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss upcoming content. Now let's begin today's story. The Neighbor. In the quiet residential block near Mercer Law School, Lauren Giddings was often seen stepping out onto her balcony each morning, carrying a thick study guide as she prepared for her bar exam. She lived alone, but no one ever worried about her. She was disciplined, reliable, and the kind of person everyone believed would soon build a promising future in law. Yet, in the final months of her life, Lauren began to feel uneasy. One day, she returned home to find her door slightly ajar, even though she was certain she had locked it. Some items inside the apartment seemed subtly out of place, moved just enough for her to notice. She confided in her boyfriend and her sister that she sometimes felt watched. The feeling wasn't constant, but it grew stronger, to the point where she planned to move away as soon as she finished her exams. Her neighbor, Stephen McDaniel, lived only a few steps from her door. He was quiet, withdrawn, and often avoided eye contact. He had once confessed feelings for Lauren, but had been rejected gently. What no one knew was that his attachment had slowly turned into fixation, a silent, escalating obsession that Lauren was unaware of. When Lauren disappeared, her friends immediately sensed something was wrong. She was not someone who skipped commitments or disappeared without notice. At her apartment, everything was undisturbed. Her wallet, computer, keys, and even the shoes she regularly wore were still there. Only Lauren was missing. Calls went unanswered, messages remained unread, and her phone was off. Friends fanned out across the campus, checked hospitals, and knocked on neighbors' doors. They tried not to think the worst, but deep down, they knew something was terribly out of place. Once police entered the picture, they found chemical traces in the bathroom, indicators that the room had been thoroughly cleaned. Environmental investigators were sent to check the building's trash containers. No one expected the discovery that followed. In a large outdoor bin, they found a portion of a woman's body wrapped in multiple layers of plastic. DNA later confirmed it belonged to Lauren. The news sent shockwaves through the community. The entire apartment complex was sealed off. Officers went door to door, searching for anything that could help reconstruct Lauren's final hours. In the shared laundry room, investigators found a saw blade stained with biological traces. This led them directly to Stephen's apartment. Inside, they discovered the packaging of a recently purchased saw, a pair of Lauren's tights, and most critically, a master key capable of opening nearly every door in the building. But the turning point came when they examined Stephen's computer. It held hundreds of covert photos and videos of Lauren's apartment. Images captured at night, footage of her window from the outside, and clips showing Stephen standing in the shadows, recording her with a small camera attached to a pole. Each frame exposed a mind sinking deeper into obsession. During questioning, Stephen initially denied everything, but the mounting evidence cornered him. Eventually, he confessed. In the early hours before dawn, he had used the master key to enter Lauren's apartment while she was sleeping. He watched her for a moment, but accidentally made a noise. Lauren awoke in terror. A struggle broke out. Unable to escape, she lost consciousness. In panic and fear of being caught, he dragged her into the bathroom. The next day, he returned to handle all remaining traces and divided her remains, placing them in trash bins around the complex in hopes they would be collected before anyone noticed. The community was stunned. The quiet, polite young man they passed in the hallway, the one who always nodded shyly, had been living beside Lauren for years while harboring thoughts that grew progressively more dangerous. Stephen was arrested in August 2011. The trial stretched on, but with overwhelming evidence, he received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Lauren's story became a haunting reminder that danger does not always arrive with warning signs or from distant places. Sometimes it exists right next to us, hidden behind a familiar face. Looking back, what pains people most is the uneasiness Lauren felt in her final days. Subtle signals she could sense but could not fully understand, signs that foretold a tragedy no one could stop. The 13 Forgotten. One afternoon in January 2018, when officers knocked on the door of a suburban home in California, everything on the outside appeared completely ordinary. The neighborhood was quiet, the lawns were neatly trimmed, and the windows of the house stayed perpetually shut. Neighbors rarely saw any children play in the yard. Few could have imagined that behind those walls existed an entirely different world. A world where the 13 children of David and Louise lived in darkness, enduring conditions no one could have believed possible. The story began years earlier, when the Turpin couple, outwardly the picture of a disciplined, conservative family, slowly drew their children into a private realm, where even the most basic aspects of life were stripped away. There were 13 of them, ranging from 2 to 29 years old. They were never allowed to go to school, never permitted to see a doctor, rarely allowed to bathe, and were fed only once a day. Some were restrained for extended periods, weeks, sometimes months at a time. Inside the house was a stifling smell, filth, and constant misery. The children grew up without sunlight, without the freedom to speak to anyone outside their parents, and without the simplest experiences that define childhood: learning, playing, and interacting with the world. They were denied everything from outdoor activities to regular meals. One of the older siblings later said, "My parents took my whole life from me." The isolation and mistreatment stretched out over many years. From the outside, the Turpins appeared to be a normal family. The house looked clean, the couple seemed quiet, and nothing about their facade hinted at the psychological cage they had constructed. No one heard children talking, laughing, or even walking outside. It was a silent house among other homes full of life. Everything changed when a 17-year-old daughter managed to escape. Trembling and terrified, she slipped out a window and dialed emergency services. Her call set off a chain of events that revealed the truth behind the closed curtains. What investigators found inside shocked even seasoned officers. One adult son, 22 years old, was restrained to a bed. Two of his siblings had been freed moments before police entered. Many had injuries around their wrists and ankles where restraints had dug into their skin. The house was in disarray, unclean, with waste scattered around. All 13 children were severely malnourished, with signs of long-term neglect. Some could barely stand. Many had little understanding of the world beyond the family home. They were fragile, physically and emotionally, after years of deprivation. When the case became public, it stunned not only the United States, but the world. People struggled to understand how such conditions could continue unnoticed for so long, especially in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Part of the answer was the Turpins' careful secrecy. They kept to themselves, avoided interactions with neighbors, and controlled every aspect of their children's lives. There were no school records, no medical visits, no sign of normal family activity. The case went to trial in April 2019. David and Louise faced numerous charges related to unlawful imprisonment, mistreatment, and prolonged abuse. They were ultimately sentenced to 25 years to life, with strict orders that they were not allowed to contact their children. Not by phone, not by letter, not directly. In court, one of the older siblings spoke with a trembling voice. Despite everything, they had tried to learn how to live, how to ride a bicycle, how to swim, how to prepare food, often teaching themselves in secret. Yet the weight of what they had lost was enormous. "My parents took my whole life from me," they repeated, a statement that echoed through the courtroom with devastating clarity. Louise, appearing frail, apologized softly. "I'm sorry for everything I did to hurt my children. I love them more than they know." To many, her apology sounded hollow, detached from the suffering she had caused. David wept, saying he hoped his children would receive proper education and that they might someday visit him. It was a faint, almost surreal expression of remorse, disconnected from the reality of their actions. Lawyers for the adult siblings later explained that the children were trying to understand their past, some even wanting to find a way to forgive. But the path toward healing would be long and uncertain. The court emphasized in its closing remarks that children are not possessions, not tools, but individuals who deserve care, opportunity, and dignity. The path traced by DNA. It begins on a quiet August evening in 1992. A 22-year-old woman named Angela Brasso was cycling alone in Phoenix, Arizona, hoping to return home after a few relaxing rounds near her favorite hangout. Her boyfriend, Joe, expected Angela to be back soon. But as time stretched on and she did not return, an uneasy feeling settled in. He gripped her bike in the silence of the night, overwhelmed by a creeping sense of dread. The following morning, an officer discovered Angela's body near her apartment. She had been attacked from behind, subjected to physical violation, and found without her head, which was missing from the scene. Her bicycle had also disappeared. 11 days later, her head was discovered in a canal outside Phoenix, nearly 2 miles from where her body had been found. Investigators noted that it showed little sign of decomposition, leading them to suspect it might have been kept cold before being discarded. Less than a year later, in 1993, another young girl vanished. 16-year-old Melanie Bernes went out for a bike ride one night, an ordinary outing that became the last moment anyone saw her alive. The next morning, a passerby noticed a pool of blood near a road by the canal. When police arrived and searched the water, they found Melanie's body. She was still dressed in a teal, one-piece outfit, clothing later believed to resemble what a potential suspect had been seen wearing. She too had been attacked and violated. DNA collected from the scene would later match Angela's case. Investigators officially linked the two crimes and referred to them collectively as the Canal cases. Hundreds of suspects surfaced. Every lead collapsed. Evidence was thin. No one matched cleanly. The cases went cold and remained untouched for nearly 20 years, locked in dusty file cabinets, like letters waiting for recipients who would never return. Then a breakthrough emerged in late 2014. Investigators learned of a new scientific method, forensic genealogy. A private company called Identifinders International specialized in it. The idea was simple yet innovative. Extract genetic material from a crime scene, hair, blood, or bodily fluids, decode it, upload it to public genealogical databases, and search for distant relatives of the unknown suspect. From there, experts could build family trees, narrow down potential identities, and identify suspects in cold cases once thought unsolvable. Detective Clark Schwarzkopf, who oversaw the Canal cold cases, forwarded the genetic samples to Identifinders International. The system returned a clue. The suspect's surname was likely Miller. 6 individuals bearing that name appeared in the analysis, but one stood out. His name was Brian Patrick Miller. At first glance, Miller appeared calm and unassuming, but his juvenile record revealed something darker. In 1989, at the age of 16, he ambushed a woman from behind as she stepped off a bus and stabbed her. He was sent to a youth facility until he turned 18, then moved into a halfway house. His mother once reported finding a disturbing note in his room, an explicit, detailed plan outlining how he intended to abduct and harm a girl. Police documented the note, but never acted on it, and the case was quietly shelved. Despite Miller's seemingly quiet adult life, Schwarzkopf refused to dismiss him. He began tailing Miller and devised an operation to collect his DNA discreetly. Miller was working at an Amazon warehouse at the time. One day, during Miller's break, Schwarzkopf approached him, posing as a security consultant concerned about thefts in nearby buildings. He casually suggested that Miller apply for a new security position and invited him to meet at a restaurant to discuss details. The point was simple: obtain a DNA-bearing object without triggering suspicion. At the restaurant, Miller arrived with his 15-year-old daughter. He ordered a burger and a drink. Initially, he refused to sip the beverage, but after a few minutes of polite conversation, he finally took a drink. As soon as Miller left, investigators collected the glass and sent it to the lab. 11 days later, the results came back. The DNA from the cup perfectly matched the genetic material recovered from both Canal cases. A forensic analyst holding the report stated simply, "It's him, Brian Miller. It's him." Police arrested him the same day. When confronted with the DNA results, Miller claimed not to understand how such a match was possible. He denied involvement in the crimes. But during a search of his house, which he shared with his teenage daughter, investigators were shocked by the condition of the home. Cluttered, filthy, nearly impassable. They found no bicycles, no tools used in the attacks, and none of the missing belongings. Yet the DNA match and his history of violence were enough to charge him. The trial began in October 2022. Miller's attorneys argued that he had suffered severe childhood trauma, resulting in dissociative amnesia, a psychological condition that supposedly impaired his memory of certain events. They insisted that he could not recall anything connected to the attacks and maintained his innocence. But prosecutors and the court rejected this defense. Judge Suzanne Cohen delivered a guilty verdict based on the genetic evidence and his violent record. In June 2023, Miller was sentenced to death. He is currently held at the Amman Correctional Complex awaiting execution. In his final statement before sentencing, Miller said, "I'm not asking for sympathy. This moment belongs to the families and friends of the victims. I can't imagine the pain they have endured all these years." His tone was barren, devoid of visible remorse. For many, the words offered no comfort. More than 20 years passed between Angela's disappearance and the moment a discarded restaurant cup revealed the truth. Between Melanie's final bicycle ride and the dawn of forensic genealogy, a man who lived openly in society, dressing up in costumes, mingling with crowds, raising a daughter, had concealed an entire hidden life. Even with the verdict, unresolved questions linger. The bicycles were never found. The weapon was never recovered. And investigators still do not know whether more victims remain unaccounted for. It is possible other cases bear his signature, but have yet to be uncovered. The shadow within the quiet temple. That night, in a small temple in Guangdong province, a place believed by many locals to hold only serenity and spiritual calm under the moonlight, police quietly approached the private quarters of a man widely known as a respected abbot. At first, he lay there silently with his eyes closed, appearing as innocent as any other sleeper. But sharp questions, flashing lights, and a secret buried for more than 2 decades forced him to face what he had spent years running from. He was not who everyone thought he was. He was the man police had been pursuing for 23 years. His name, Li, a surname that, for many, now symbolizes a disturbing mystery. In 2001, in Zhejiang province, 2 lives were taken away by him and an accomplice. After the incident, the accomplice was quickly arrested, but Li fled and vanished without a trace. As investigators pressed forward and fear spread through the community, all leads on Li grew cold. People assumed he had simply disappeared from the world. But in truth, he had not vanished, he had only changed form. Li escaped Zhejiang, slipping through several provinces in central China, moving through Sichuan, then Hunan. There, he acted like an ordinary, optimistic man drifting with the uncertainties of life. One fateful day, he happened to find an identification card belonging to a man named Lu, abandoned somewhere. That card became the key. He picked it up and changed his name. With this new identity, he registered at a Buddhist college. Instead of living as a faceless fugitive, Li seemed determined to erase his past completely. But he chose an astonishing path. He walked through the gates of a monastery. He shaved his head, donned monastic robes, and studied scripture. A transformation not only of name, but of entire lifestyle. Gradually, people began to believe that Monk Li, under his assumed identity, was truly someone else. In 2008, Monk Li moved to Guangdong province. Over time, he earned admiration, disciplined in his studies, devoted and diligent in temple affairs. His reputation grew among local Buddhists. Over the years, this so-called monk even married and had 2 children. Locals believed he was a person who had entered the monastic world without fully leaving secular life, never imagining that behind those saffron robes was a man hiding profound wrongdoing. To keep his secret safe, he did many unusual things. He disguised himself whenever he went out, installed surveillance cameras around the temple to watch for unexpected police appearances, and severed all contact with his past family in Sichuan, as if determined to build a completely new life. For 23 years. During all that time, no one, not his new family, not the monks, not the Buddhist community, ever suspected that this respected spiritual figure was someone who once darkened the lives of others. To them, he was a humble teacher, a guardian of the temple, a source of peace and wisdom. Until one day in March 2024, when the secret cracked open. Police in Zhejiang province, after many years of chasing fading leads, received new information suggesting that Li might be hiding in Guangdong. Knowing he may have changed identities, investigators began surveillance. They soon discovered that the abbot of a small, revered temple, a man trusted by many, was in fact the fugitive they had been searching for. A quiet arrest operation was planned. One night, officers entered the room where he slept. At first, he denied every accusation. But the evidence, fingerprints, digital records, witness statements, was undeniable. Eventually, he admitted that he was Li, the man who had lived under a false identity for 23 years. The news spread rapidly. Chinese social media erupted. He built an entirely new life, became an abbot, married, had children, all while being a wanted man. Another wrote, "Unbelievable. Even novels or films cannot compare." In the eyes of many, the monk had once been a symbol of humility and compassion, someone entrusted with spreading spiritual teachings, guiding faith, and offering tranquility. But to investigators, he was a man responsible for a long-buried tragedy. For 23 years, he had not only evaded the law, but had lived in the robes of a spiritual leader, revered by those who sought peace. His arrest did more than end a long pursuit. It reopened an old wound, forcing people to ask themselves, behind the gentle exterior of those who appear enlightened, how many are hiding shadows no one has yet uncovered?